Welcome back to the corner of Whimsy and Bliss. It's Kina Renee here, and I am coming to you from my dining room. um, the reason I'm in my dining room is because we're in northern Alabama, zone 8A, and it is very cold. And the cold has basically run me indoors. Our first frost happened on November 10th, in which it pretty much forced me to end my growing at that moment. We had a few things that were still hanging on from the summer. We had some tomatoes, some peppers, some eggplant, a few zinnias, a few sunflowers. And that was mainly just me not having the heart to, pull everything right then, because I'm like, what about the bees? What about the birds? What are they going to do when all these things are gone? Also, I didn't have a lot of plant life growing in this space, in my grow space, prior to me planting it. So it wasn't like there was going to be anything left once I pulled out all of the summer crops. So it took me longer than it should have. Poor things, they had to freeze to death for me to finally say, it's time. Rest in peace to all my babies. But we got everything cleaned up. And now, unfortunately, we are smack dab in our Persephone period, and things are slowing down. We do get frost here, and the sun is lower, the days are shorter, the house casts shade onto my grow beds, my raised beds, and we don't have the heat that we need to really germinate anything quickly. I typically start on my seeds outside, because my first year trying to sow them indoors and start them with the heat lights and the grow mats and all of that basically caused my house to be infested with gnats. So I will never, ever, 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 ever try to start anything indoors anymore. So I do have some seedlings that are out. I have a rack on my patio. Unfortunately, it is not screened in. That would have helped tremendously, but they're cold season crops, so they're hanging on, but they're not thriving. So what I'm going to try and do to try and salvage my fall winter garden while in my Persephone period, and thinking of what I could do different to get me set up for my spring garden, is I'm going to try and do some winter sowing / outdoor seed sowing / making like a makeshift greenhouse situation, which again, life happens and things, tend to slow you down, or you don't get to do things that you had planned. I purchased a greenhouse kit last March, I think it was. It's been hanging out in my shed. When I initially got it, I didn't have it installed right away because I needed to do some research. I needed to make sure that, one, I knew how to fortify one of these greenhouse kits, which is really cute. It's the Howe aluminum polycarbonate greenhouse. It's so cute. It's like a really pretty green. It's 8x8. Really cute and had really great reviews. But my grow space is sloped. I have a very severe slope from the back of my yard coming toward the house, and where I had intended to put the greenhouse was the most severe. So I knew that because we get a lot of wind, a lot of rain, we do get like tornadoes here. We have some pretty severe weather here. And I didn't want my beautiful little greenhouse to go flying through the neighborhood, not only because I didn't want to lose it, but I didn't want it to damage anyone else's property, because that's just how bad the winds can be here. So I needed to do some research and figure out placement, foundation, how to fortify it, how to basically seal everything up so that it was watertight. I wanted to make sure that it would be a healthy greenhouse, basically, before I got started. It took some time to figure all of that out, and by the time I was ready to go, it's now in the dead heat of Alabama's summers, and I didn't feel good about having a contractor come out in that type of environment and try and put this thing together. So I told myself I'd wait until fall. Fall came, rolled around, but then it just got cold so fast. And I'm like, I can't have this guy out there in the cold trying to put this thing together. But what am I going to do about, sowing my seeds? How am I going to get my garden off the ground? So I've decided to wait until the second the weather breaks in the spring and it starts to warm up. It's comfortable, it's tolerable, because it won't just be this gentleman that'll be putting this thing together. From everything that I've read and watched, it takes multiple people. It's a kit. It's not one of the beautiful BC greenhouses. It's not like the Vago Garden greenhouse where it's like simple to put together. Unfortunately, the price that I'm paying for this beautiful greenhouse is the fact that, everything that I've read in terms of reviews and testimonials basically stated that the instructions are garbage. But I do have a plan for that. I am going to take a picture of every single page and I am going to run it through my ChatGPT and tell it to translate to easy to follow instructions in English. So I do have a plan. However, now I have to figure out how I'm going to get some things growing, because again, our first frost happened on November 10th. I've been stuck in the house. I am losing my mind. The only thing that kept me sane during the summer was the fact that I could go outside and tinker in my backyard. And yes, it was a lot of work and it was a lot of heat, but it just did something for my mental health and my well-being to be able to get outside, get some exercise, fresh air, some sunshine, and to actually see some things come to fruition that I had really been hoping and praying for a very long time. And I miss that. I miss it so much. My days are long and stressful, and I don't have that outlet anymore because I'm stuck in the house. And like the winter blues is happening. It's so cold and wet here. And I just need to get outside. So the plan that I have for today, again, harebrained, I'm sure, but I'm hoping that it'll work. So I recently purchased a couple things. And I'm sure you guys have all seen, these little things here. And yes, I could have just gone the route of water bottles and milk jugs and this and that. But I don't know about you guys, but certain things just have to make sense for me. Like when I first started last year, I did the toilet paper rolls and the paper towel rolls. I did water bottles, Dixie cups, and, strawberry clamshells and salad plastic takeout container. Like, you name it, I did it because I wasn't set up. I was brand new. I didn't have a setup. It was not fun. It was messy. Nothing worked well. I was watering too much. I didn't know what I was doing, and it created this mess. All the gnats. I wasted all the seed, wasted the soil, all the amendments, and I just didn't want to do that. Now I understand that this could fail too. It could totally fail too. But I've been doing a lot more research. I've been really reading a lot, really trying to understand what's happening outside. When you start a plant outside that is cold tolerant, that needs cold to germinate, the reason winter sowing works is because you're putting the plant, the seedling, in the environment that it would actually grow up in, that it will benefit from. So it's getting, it's not getting overwatered. It's getting the type of water it would get if it was in the wild. It's getting some wind. It's getting the sun, what amount of sun is possible at this time of year. So you're basically putting them in an environment, the seeds in an environment that they would naturally grow up in. And I thought, well, that makes sense to me. So let's try it. I couldn't get my greenhouse up and running just yet. I don't have enough cloches for the amount of seeds that I need to start. I personally enjoy starting all my seeds. Anything that I plant or intend to grow, I like to start it from seed because I like the variety. That's very important to me. We're very limited on what we can get in the supermarkets here. The things that are available, they're not always the freshest. They lack variety. It's the standard things, and I kind of want some fun, exciting things that I can't normally get. So I like starting the seeds for that reason. I like being able to control the particular plants, and I mean, not just the type of plant, but I enjoy the fragrance, the colors, the textures, you know, dwarf versus standard. I really like the look of having a very diverse and lush garden. So for me, starting seed is ideal, you know, and it is one of those, for me, one of those final frontier tasks or skills that a gardener really, in my opinion, my humble opinion, that a gardener really should have, because in my case, by the time I've spent all the money on establishing the garden, from the beds, trellises, obelisk, soil amendments, all of those things, I just don't want to spend any more money. Like I'm done spending money, and I don't even have. I would have to spend a small fortune on seedlings to do what I'm trying to do. Um, so it just makes sense. Let's go ahead and get the seed started. And not only am I starting seed for the plants that myself and my family intend to eat, but I'm also starting all the seeds for the borders in my front yard, front and side yards, for all the flowers and herbs and things that I plan on growing out there. Everything for all the seeds and plants that I intend on growing in the window boxes on my shed. Um, I'm also trying to do a cottage style border garden for the entire backyard. So eventually there'll be lots of fruit trees back there. I hope that we can grow some nut trees back there. In terms of privacy trees, I want to have like magnolia, gardenia, jasmine, a couple of like evergreen pine trees, but definitely a couple of magnolias. I'll have to keep them dwarf because unfortunately our soil here is not the best. It just isn't. It's rocky clay. It's full of limestone. It is almost impenetrable. So it's not like I'll be able to plant in ground. So everything that we bring in will have to be in some type of container, whether it's a whiskey barrel. I do hope to have some of the larger concrete and terracotta pots. I'm trying my hand at building some things. I'd like to do some of the kind of French style wooden planter boxes also. I love my whiskey barrels. They have been so fun and really beautiful, a really nice natural element to my garden, considering my raised beds are metal. I like the softness and the added color, because my beds are also dark. They're the slate gray, and my house is brown. So I needed to bring something lighter and softer into the space. So trees will be going in eventually, even if I have to put them in one at a time, because you know they come with a cost. But in terms of all of the flowers that I plan on growing in the border garden and everywhere on the property, really, it's all getting started from seed. So that brings me back to these containers. Now, most people, they set theirs, they do theirs, I guess I've seen them called shoebox gardens. I've also seen them called adapted winter sowing. This is basically taking the place of the milk jugs and, you know, the water bottles and all those things. It's taking that place. Now, I couldn't get the ones that had a clear lid. If I had the clear lid, that would have been so ideal. What I could have done then is just fill the soil about here and then basically planted all of the seeds, and, you know, I could have separated them so that it basically is creating a soil block. Now, in my case, because the lid is white and it's not going to let as much light in, I'm going to flip mine. So then this becomes a cloche. So I'm going to, I plan on trying it a couple of ways. I do have a ton of seed starting trays that I could, in theory, basically, you know, plant them up and put them on the lid. You know, there'll be holes in the lid so that it'll allow for drainage. And then also a couple of holes in the top that will allow rain and things like that. We do get snow here occasionally, so it could allow some snow to get in there and melt to keep everything watered. But the fact that the clear side will be on top will allow what little light that we do have coming in this time of year to at least get in there and take care of the plants. Having the cloche on there will keep them a little bit warmer. I do have another little trick that I plan on doing for my rack. I have one of those. I'm sure you guys have seen this, but I believe my rack is 6 tiers. I think it's 6. I don't know. It may be 7 tiers. I don't know. Anyway, metal rack. You can get them at, you know, the big box. You can get them anywhere. But basically, you know, the poles with the mesh or the wire mesh racks. What I'm going to do with that is basically wrap them with incandescent LED lights. Actually, I said that wrong. Incandescent Christmas lights, so that I can plug them in. They'll be sitting right off of my patio. I do have an exterior plug that is protected from the weather and everything. I'm gonna wrap that thing with those lights, plug it in, and you know, it's a Christmas light, so it's intended on being outside in the elements. So it should give it a little bit of warmth, an extra light where it needs it. Obviously, cold weather plants don't need as much of the heat germination as, you know, like the heat loving plants would need. So I think that it would be okay by setting them up out there like that. Now again, I'm a first year gardener. I don't know what I'm doing. This is just me, my brain, and all of my planning and, you know, research and trying to make things make sense. In theory, it's going to work. So we're going to see. So what I'm doing right now, I'm going to just take and put a few holes in here. And I'm trying to see where, and of course you can't see it on camera, but I'm trying to see where it's like a little channel where to place my holes. So the way this lid, it's like a little channel there, so it kind of drops down right there. So I wouldn't put the holes down here. I'll put the holes up here where it's flat, because that's where the plants are, or the trays, the cell trays are going to sit. And I don't want to create a bigger problem but for myself by not having proper drainage. So I've got my handy dandy glue gun. This is the one that I'm willing to sacrifice in case this gets all gummed up with all this plastic. And all I'm gonna do is just pop a couple holes in here to allow for drainage. So bear with me just a moment. You know, one thing about being a gardener is you become a DIY person. And you truly become a problem solver. If you weren't already one, being a gardener forces you to be that, because you have to pivot. You have to be agile, and nothing is ever going to just go the way that you want it to. So you have to really find ways of making things make sense for yourself. Like in this case, I couldn't get my greenhouse in, which would have been so ideal if that would have happened. You know, I could have started all, you know, trays and trays and trays. I have probably about 50. I probably have the setup to start about 50 trays, 10, 20 trays full of seedlings. And that would have been so much fun to be able to just go outside and, you know, just play and get all of those trays started, get all of those seedlings started, and just pop them up in my little greenhouse. That would have just been amazing, but it just didn't happen. And sometimes you just have to go with that and just accept it. Everything happens when it's supposed to happen. You know, like this could be the year that we had a tornado come through, and I could have rushed to get that greenhouse set up before having the foundation properly set up, or before truly understanding how to keep the thing healthy, and it blew away, or it got infested, or, you know, I have to choose to look at it. I'm one of those glass half full kind of people, and because, you know, the way that my mind works, I plan everything. I look at every single variable that I can think of. And even if I haven't thought of it, I'm asking what else could happen? What else could impact success? And so I take my time to do certain things because one, I'm not one to waste a lot of money. Like, obviously there is some waste when you're in gardening because you're learning, right? But, by the time I've made the investment on, everything that goes into this, I need it to work. I don't need to be in a situation where I'm having to constantly do a lot of rework because, it's just not fun that way. And one thing that I think everyone should be mindful of is that gardening does not have to come with a huge expense. Now, I say that with a caveat because the expenses come when there are a couple things that one doesn't have. I'll use myself as an example. When I decided to start a garden, I didn't have a house. I didn't have anything. I lived in Texas in an apartment that was tiny. And having an apartment having a garden was not an option. I didn't even have an option for a green stock in the apartment that I lived in. So I had to, I woke up on a Tuesday and decided, I'm done with Texas. I think I'm moving. And I looked all over the United States. Scoured the United States. Zillow and all of the different websites that you can use to, research property and everything. We were we were besties at that point, looking for a place that, one, was affordable in terms of the home itself, but also that was safe. I'm not married or anything, so I needed it to be a place that an unmarried woman could be safe. I needed it to have enough land, and I say land in quotation, air quotes, because I would not call my space, my backyard, my grow space land by any stretch of the imagination, but it is enough space back there for me to plant and grow. But mainly it had to be affordable. And at the time, I lived in northern Texas in a suburb in Frisco, Texas, basically. And, the apartment that I lived in, the rent is more than my mortgage here. And so it just made sense. Pack it up and move across country so that you can have a garden, which means that my garden costs even more than I even care to admit to. But again, you have to have certain things. You have to have some land. And on that land, you need to have great soil. You need to have space. You need to have the proper sunlight. And I didn't have any of that, no home, nothing. So I had to find the house, find one that I could work with that would allow me to do what I was trying to do, which was start this garden. I had to make sure that I was going to be able to get some sun because, I don't know if y'all have ever kind of driven through a neighborhood. There are some neighborhoods that are so beautiful and mature. They're full of trees, all these big giant trees. And while they're gorgeous and, picturesque and, Hallmark worthy, I'm like, I can't even grow anything back there because there's so many big giant trees. In my case, I didn't have any trees. So that kind of worked to my favor to an extent. It hasn't been fun because obviously when you have some trees in your yard, it just beautifies the space, right? But, I had to find those things, and finding them took some time. And once everything was in place and I'm going, okay, it's now go time. Let's get this garden going. I had to come to the realization that I couldn't grow on ground. I just couldn't grow on ground. So that meant it came with an added expense of, purchasing above ground raised beds. Then I had to realize that I couldn't just dig the soil up or the dirt that was in my yard and fill those beds. So that came with, okay, I've got to purchase soil. Most people would buy it in bulk. That isn't an option in an HOA. So long story short, I didn't have what I needed, and then in terms of starting the seeds and things like that, I still didn't have what I needed. I eventually invested in all of the seed starting trays and cells through Epic Gardening. And I did that not because I had to, not because it's a requirement in order to start a garden, but because it made things easier. Another thing that a person needs is a lot of time when you're starting from absolutely nothing. And I say what I mean by that is, when you work full time, you have demanding jobs. Yes, gardening is technically a hobby for me, but it's also a necessity because I hope that what is produced in this garden can feed my family. I hope that it also creates industry for me, and community outreach for me. That's how I plan to use what is produced on this property. But when you don't have a lot of time, you don't have the right setup in itself, efficiency is key, right? So yes, I could have continued with the cups and the this and the that to try and, save money, but it wasn't efficient and I was wasting product. I was wasting time. Nothing was working. So I made the investment. It made it a lot more fun. It made it something that I looked forward to doing. Like I couldn't wait to get out there and start seeds. It's still my favorite thing to do, aside from buying seed, which I'm working on that. But having the right tools, think of yourself, like if you're a new gardener, I'm not saying go out there and spend a lot of money, but definitely evaluate your situation, your environment, your needs, and think of yourself as like a professional in terms of your success in the garden will come as a result of the effort that you put into it. Think about, doctors. They're not just going to DIY, what they need to successfully operate, or even a carpenter. They have the most beautiful, advanced, well-kept tools because they are artists, they're craftsmen, or even someone who is, let's say, a baker. They're investing in the finest pans and ingredients. They have beautiful aprons. They're investing in their tools, the things that they need to produce a quality product. And that's the same for gardeners. Do what you can that's within budget. If you can save cost, save the cost. But if your priority is function, production, peace of mind, ease, like mine was, you make the investment. The gorilla carts, we absolutely needed those, in order to move like the equivalent of, I want to say 400 and something bags of soil and mulch and sand. We needed that gorilla cart. There was no way we were getting that done without it. So much so that on the big day when we were moving the materials into the beds, finally getting the beds filled, one of the wheels, one of the little pins, I forget what they're called specifically, but one of the pins that holds the gorilla cart wheel in place came off, which meant and this was the big gorilla cart, the heavy duty one that holds like, I want to say like 1,700 pounds or something ridiculous like that, but it was the one we needed. I also had the smaller metal one. I want to say that one was, I don't know, it was not small, but not enough to do what we needed to do. So when that pin came out and that wheel was down, we were like, how are we going to get this done? And so we're like combing the backyard trying to find, that pin. Now, thank goodness for young minds. I had college students here that were helping me fill the beds. And one of them had been helping me build my trellises, and it came with a little screwdriver. This young mind looked at the hole that needed to hold that held the pin for the wheel, looked at the screwdriver, popped it in, and we kept on working. It was amazing. And but that Gorilla Cart made that entire build doable. These seed starting trays, I at one point planted enough seed, like my yard, my patio, my little rack, it looked like a nursery. And I mean, another reason why these seed starting trays and cells and things are important, and even the prep work, like what I'm doing today, is important, is because you get a better quality. My seedlings were so gorgeous and strong and healthy that I created my own potting mix, my own seed starting mix. I put myself on a schedule. I learned how to properly water them, how to properly feed them, when to start feeding them, how to prune them, basically how to keep them strong and healthy. And they were gorgeous, to the point where the roots were so gorgeous. Like, and it was the biggest flex for a new gardener, having strong, healthy roots that were not root bound, because these particular cell starting or seed starting cells, they have slits on the side and they're open at the bottom. So one, they allow you to bottom water so that the roots are forced to reach down to try and get to the water. But they also have the slits on the side that create an air pruning experience. So they're not going to be root bound. So that made them stronger and healthier. I started them outside, so they were growing up in the environment that they would live in. They got the wind, they got the rain, they got the sunlight that they would ultimately be growing in. And it just made the experience so wonderful, because, you know, when you're new, you have so many things that don't go wrong, or that will go wrong, that just will not pan out. You know, your first time growing carrots, you're probably going to be disappointed. The very first time your tomato plant gets taken out by hornworms, you're going to be like, that's it, I can't do it. Or when that basil plant dies, you're going to be like, okay, I have a black thumb. Just keep on going. But also think about the things that you did, do some research, figure out what you can do different, what you can do better, what's going to be the most successful way for you to achieve whatever it is you're trying to grow. I know now that I can't start zinnia seeds in August and expect them to thrive. I just can't do it. It was too hot. It took everything that I had to get these zinnias to bloom. We had the foliage, you know, the foliage got tall and strong early, which meant, you know, I had the right amount of nitrogen in my soil. I tested my soil. Everything was within balance. But what I didn't factor is they were stressed. That heat was literally killing them. They hadn't had a chance to establish strong roots. So I had to start researching ways to fortify those roots. So I started having to add more P and K of the NPK and try and get those roots established. I had to put shade over them to make sure that they weren't getting scorched. The same with my sweet potatoes, the same with just about everything that was growing over the summer. But I say all that to say is there's some prep work that goes into this, and how you start, how you get yourself organized, and everything is going to make all the difference. These little greenhouses are going to help me have a successful spring. It means the difference between me having plants that will be ready to go in the soil and, you know, start producing earlier versus not having that. You know, when you don't have bees, and I learned this the hard way, because again, I wasn't ready. When you don't have bees and you don't have, you know, the ladybugs and, you know, the butterflies and all that, when you do not have them in place, it makes anything that you're doing that much harder. Because I was able to grow beautiful squash plants, and squash became my favorite thing to grow because it was an easy win, right? The problem with that is with the squash plants came the squash bugs and the squash vine borer, the leaf-footed bugs, and just you name it, they showed up. It's as though this garden had basically a buffet open sign on it for all the bugs in the state, is what it felt like. I could not get a break when dealing with these bugs. And it was so terrible because I didn't have anything to fight them. I didn't have any of the herbs that makes everything stinky. You know, I didn't have any onions or garlic or chives or, you know, marigolds. I didn't have anything growing. And so it made it so that, excuse me, they came and they feasted and feasted and feasted and feasted. Now, I was able to get some yields from some of my plants because by then I was learning. You know, that's one thing about gardening also. You're constantly learning. And if you're not, then you're doing yourself a disservice. It is to your benefit to make sure that you are reading, you're listening to podcasts, you're watching videos. You know, if you can spend some time in nurseries asking questions. But mainly, what I found is I needed to do the research for myself because there's so much misinformation out there. There's so many half-truths out there. There's always some new gimmick, some new thing to get a click. And what that does to a new gardener is a person will put a video or something out and you'll be like, okay, great, I can do that. But it's half information, you know. And what I mean by that is there's been some videos that I watched that said, you know, this is how you prevent pests in your gardens. All you have to do is plant herbs and flowers among your fruits and veggies, and that'll take care of the pest. And so you're like, okay, so you just start planting herbs and flowers, and it may not be the right herbs or the right flowers for that season. They may not play well together. They may hinder, they may do something damaging to your soil. Or some of those same plants, you know, some people may tell you the right plant to use, but they don't tell you that that plant needs a cold period, or it really, you know, they make it seem like you can start it at any point in that you want, but it may need a cold period. It may need light to germinate. It may need hard pruning. So if you're waiting on someone to tell you exactly what you need to do to be a successful gardener, again, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're going to have to do some of that work yourself. And that's part of the fun. That's part of the journey, the growth and the learning. Gardening is a skill. It is something that I personally think should absolutely be taught in every single classroom from the time a child can read. I feel like that is something that, you know, we have lost as a society, and it's dangerous. I had the luxury of having grown up with grandparents who always had a garden. Once I was a teenager, they lived out, they had a little bit of acreage and they planted a garden there as well. They had a garden when they lived in the city, but when they got their acreage, they really went for it. My parents always had a small garden, but nothing on the scale that I'm trying to do. Not that I'm special in any way, but I feel compelled, and the Lord has put it in my heart to not just grow food for me, and not just, you know, keep the knowledge that I'm learning to myself. I want so much to grow enough in my small 1/4 of an acre backyard. I want to grow enough food that I can share, and through my sharing, I want it to motivate others to get inspired and grow as well. I want to show them that it can be easy. You know, like I've done the inexpensive route, you know, the DIY route, but then I've also obviously done the route, the growing route that required an investment. My particular investment is not the same as others' investment. You know, what's inexpensive to me may be expensive to someone else. And of course, what's um, expensive to me may be a drop in the bucket for someone else, but they're still not growing anything. And I feel like every person, especially now in 2025, nearing 2026, we should all be growing something. I know in my case, I want to grow food that is healthy, that is nutrient dense. I need to know where it's coming from. I want it to be fresh, and I need mass quantities of it for health reasons and just the life that I want to live, the longevity of life and quality of life that I want to live. I realize that being closer to plant-based in terms of diet is going to be essential for me. And to be able to do that requires a garden. Like, there's just no way for what I want, my diet to look like. There's just no way I could afford to purchase organic, non-GMO, all of the varieties and everything that I want in my diet. There's just no way that I could afford to do it. So it just makes sense to me to get out there, get in the garden, grow it yourself, share some with your friends, give it to the neighbors, help them get inspired. Like, the biggest flex of my life would be if I could get my neighbors who, right now I'm the only person in this subdivision that's growing anything, which is why the bugs find me. There isn't anything else for them. But the biggest flex of my life would be to get my neighbors on board and get them planting something and get the HOA on board so that we could have a community garden. I would love that so much. To have a community garden here in our subdivision and have that become a thing, like other subdivisions do the same. I also hope that my church, they are building a new building, and I would so love it. And this is something that I'm praying about because obviously I don't have a lot of time, but God is able. He could make a way for this to become my job so that I'm not having to punch a clock every day, and I can focus my efforts and energy on, growing and helping others grow. But I would love for the church to allow a community garden there as well. They'll have the space. It's a new building. It's doable. So I'm using this time that I am learning and developing and mastering. Not that I'm a master by any stretch of the, but I'm mastering some things. And each time you learn something new and you have success in it, I consider that a measurement of mastery. So as I'm learning, I hope to be able to share, and not just share the bounty and the harvest, but also the knowledge and the experiences, because it is so much fun. Like, even now, just this little mundane task, just being able to get here on camera and knowing that in a little bit I'm going to be able to go outside. It's raining right now, so that's another reason why I'm in the house. But I'll be able to go outside and get this project of mine off the ground. I'm also waiting for the delivery of a couple of amendments that I need for my seed starting mix. And once I get that, then I'm going to do my version of winter sowing, seed blocking, soil blocking rather, and get things going, get things back on track. One thing that I will say is I wish I'd never heard the term Persephone period. Which it was a blessing and a curse, because it caused so much panic and anxiety for me, realizing that there was a point in the growing season that things just will not grow because there's not enough sun, there's not enough light, not enough warmth. And it took me down this rabbit hole of understanding what the meaning of that phrase was. And it basically goes back to Greek mythology. And I don't want to butcher it because I don't have it committed to memory exactly what the meaning was, but it's basically based on the story of Hades taking Persephone to the underworld. And during that period, her mother was so devastated and basically just wouldn't allow things to grow. Her despair and anger and rage caused the weather and everything to shift to a point where crops were dying, animals were dying, because she was just so distraught, so beyond upset that her child had been taken. And so each year, Hades would allow Persephone to come back from the underworld, and in that time, everything all was right in the world. So that's, our growing season when everything is thriving. But then when it was time for her to go back to the underworld, again, her mother going through that despair caused the seasons to change to a point where we could no longer grow. And I mean, reading about it, I was just like, oh my goodness, this is devastating. One, I'm just reading about a mother's despair and how that type of love, I'm not a parent, so I don't know what that feels like, really. I mean, obviously I love my niece and nephew, and I love my puppy, and obviously my family members, but I know it's a different type of love when it's a parent who's lost their child. And so I just really, I enjoyed reading about it, but then also thinking about what that meant in terms of, what we're dealing with as gardeners. And so it scared me. I was like, oh my God, I gotta kick it in overdrive. I gotta get something going. And the thought of trying to start things outdoors in the cold, dampness, I knew that wasn't gonna work. So knowing I couldn't get my greenhouse in on time, I said, okay, this is gonna have to do, and I have to trust that this is gonna work. So I'm gonna definitely keep everyone posted on how it works. I'll be recording the actual mixing of my soil, getting the seed starting trays filled. I do plan on doing some of the traditional soil blocking, like using the lid as the base for the soil blocks, and then just kind of making the soil cube firm and cutting it myself so that I'll be able to take the whole cube and plant that when the time is right. So we're going to do a little bit of that also. But for right now, we're just getting everything started. That was the easy part for the bottoms, or the close rather. The lids are a little bit thicker, so they're harder to go through. So I'll do that off camera. But I just wanted to just quickly share some of the things that you can grow depending on where you are. Like in my case, I'm in zone 8A. Not completely freezing, but we get cold. Some of the things that will still grow during the Persephone period, I broke it up in categories. So herbs, fruit, veg, and flowers. So again, Alabama, northern Alabama on the border of Tennessee, we can still grow, which is exciting. We can still grow dill, oregano, thyme, lavender, chive, cilantro, parsley, fennel, chervil, sage, chamomile, lemon balm, lovage, catnip, bee balm, and rosemary. So I am going to start as many, like I have 40 of these little greenhouses. I'm going to try and give each plant its own greenhouse so that, the watering, everything, the conditions will be right. Everything should sprout at the same time. If I can do more, then just like if I can fit multiples of each plant, like all 40 of these little greenhouses are getting filled, basically. In terms of fruit, now these won't go in the greenhouses, but I do have some work that I'll have to do because I have some bare root. So my gooseberries, I have seed for that. I have elderberry seed that will go in these greenhouses, but then I have bare root, blackberry, strawberry, and raspberry that I need to get prepped. So I know I have to soak them and everything. I do want them to overwinter. So I'm going to soak them, get them in a little bit of fertilizer, like starter fertilizer, get them potted up, and then basically just let them be. I have some taller seed starting cells that I can put them in. I'll place them in one of my empty beds, just kind of set them on top of the soil in the empty bed. And I do have some cloches that can go over them while they're sitting in their tray or cell. My hope is that when the time is right, I'll be able to pull the entire plug out. The roots will have established in the soil, and I'll be able to pop them in the containers that they'll be growing in. I plan on growing all of the berries in whiskey barrels. The whiskey barrels are about 2 feet wide, and I want to say, if I'm not mistaken, they are 15 to 17 inches deep. So that's ideal for the berries. I will eventually be growing blueberries as well, and the blueberries are especially suited for the barrels because they require acidic soil. So I'll be able to amend the soil specifically for the blueberries in their barrels so that they will have the ideal growing condition as well. I can't actually plant the berries until I can seal the fence and put the barrels where they need to be. So kind of going through this cold season, letting them pot up is ideal until I can get some dry days to get the fence sealed. I've tried to get this fence sealed. It's either raining or storming or too hot. It's always something. I have been trying. I need to make sure that I have a few days after a rain for the fence to dry out, then seal it, making sure that I have a few days before it rains again. So it's never ending. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse. Lord, I'm thankful for all the rain that we do get because this garden is going to need it. Speaking of which, that's another thing that kind of kept me from starting the fall winter garden when I should have, because I was like, how are we going to water this thing? Here where we are, we get freezing temperatures to the point where we have to like cover and wrap all of our spigots to keep them from freezing. We also have to like leave all of our cabinet doors open so that the heat from the house will keep the pipes and everything warm so that they don't burst. So I was thinking, how am I going to water the garden if I can't even plug a water hose or, hook a water hose up to the spigots? Not realizing the rain will take care of that too. Again, research, learning is fundamental, because the fact that these plants that I'm going to continue listing, they don't require as much water during the winter as they would during the summer. So what we will get in terms of rain, if we get some snow, if there's some ice, that will be enough to keep them watered and moist and alive, basically. So I don't necessarily need to worry about, having the water hose hooked up. Now, I do have a couple of large storage containers that I plan on keeping full of water so that if we go a stretch that we don't have a lot of rain, I can still make sure that the plants are well taken care of. I'll make sure that, they continue to thrive. But yeah, there's so many things you got to think about. In terms of veggies that can still be grown during the Persephone period, lettuce, kale, spinach, bok choy or pak choy, collards, mustard, chard, Swiss chard, perpetual spinach, arugula, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, tatsoi, green onions, garlic, shallots, and Brussels sprouts. That's a ton of veggies, all of my favorites, especially during the winter and it's soup season, all of those things. Yes. So I'm going to get some started in these greenhouses. I am also, and please wish me luck, friends, I am going to also plan out one of my beds. I have 4 6x6 beds that I need to plant. I didn't want to run the risk of planting all 4 and, God forbid, everything failed. So I'm going to plant one entirely from seed. Then I will also have all of the plants that I'm starting in these greenhouses that I will treat as succession planting. And then, of course, by the time we get to the spring, when it's time for us to start like our last frost, Our last frost last year, I want to say was April, like April 10th, something like that. I want to be ready. I want to have seedlings, strong, healthy seedlings that are ready to plant in these beds and go. So that's my logic. Whether it's going to happen, whether it'll work, I don't know, but I'm going to try. In terms of flowers, because again, I'm trying to grow not just for the backyard, but also for the front and the sides, and as well as the border garden. Why it's so important to have flowers in your garden. One, we truly need the assistance of the beneficial insects to come into the garden and pollinate. I grew lots of squash last year, but I had to hand pollinate everything. The cucumbers, I didn't have the varieties that were self-pollinating, so I was out there pollinating cucumbers, squash, eggplant, tomato. Like the tomatoes obviously don't necessarily need it, but okra. Like I was quite literally getting up at like 5 in the morning, like peeking out the window, like, are there any blossoms open? And then running outside, like, is this a male flower? Do we have a male and a female? You know, when the watermelons were growing, same thing. Do we have a male and a female flower? Did I give it enough pollen? Let me give it a little bit more pollen. I need the beneficials to do that for me this year in 2026. So basically, I'm going to give them a buffet. They're going to have a smorgasbord. They're going to be able to feast on all of the beautiful flowers, all of the herbs that they need to stay a while. Come and visit and stay a while. I'm looking for bee houses. I may just DIY one. I want to do like a bee and wasp hotel. So I want to do that. I want to get a couple of bird houses, some hummingbird feeders. Oh, the hummingbirds that were in the yard last year. It did my heart some good. Oh my God, it was so wonderful. I want to make sure that I have the milkweed for the monarchs and all of those things, and have some watering places for them as well. So some of the flowers that can still be grown through the cold season, that require cold stratification, that actually benefit from the cold. Snapdragons, strawflowers, lavender, which is technically lavender and echinacea are herbs, but you know what I mean. Lavender, echinacea, or coneflower, poppies, calendula, bachelor's button, sweet peas, violas, pansies, bells of Ireland. Oh, I can't wait. Canterbury bells, foxglove, hollyhocks, sweet williams, rudbeckia, Shasta daisies, phlox, of course the milkweed, the yarrow, coreopsis, and my favorite, feverfew. I envision just puffs of flowers all over the place. I want to see big fat fluffy bees. I want to see the little hoverflies. I want to see like all of them. They're all welcome. Surprisingly enough, there were so many in the yard once the flowers finally started blooming last year, which was so sad because it was so short-lived. But once they did start blooming, there was so much activity in the yard. I mean, and they would get right next to you. Like the hummingbirds, they're such divas. The hummingbirds, they would come in flying at 1,000,000 miles an hour and like zoom right past your face and then stop so you could admire and appreciate them. They would stop so you could see them, and then they would take off. I mean, we had finches, we had mourning doves, and they were welcome. Like they didn't bother. Now, granted, I didn't have probably all the yummy stuff that they really wanted, but what I did have out there, they didn't bother. You know, they ate the sunflowers, which was fine, but they didn't bother me. I didn't get stung at all. Now, I am kind of a wuss when it comes to being afraid of bugs and stuff. Like I still can't just grab a squash bug and smash him, or grab a worm or hornworm and pick him off. I still can't do it. A couple layers of gloves, some tongs. That's the only way that I can do it. I'm not there yet. No judgment. I'm working on it. But I understand that there's a time and place that they have to be welcome. They all serve a purpose. The beneficials as well as the pest. Now, the ants were the bane of my existence. They were so, like they were basically farming aphids, but they were taking over everything. They were taking over the potatoes and, oh, it was a mess. But I got a plan for them too. So yeah, next video, I'm going to be going over the seeds that I'll be planting. We'll get some mix started together, and I'll just show you the process of how I'm going to use my little mini greenhouses. I'll show you myself moving the rack into position where it's going to be, and just talk through some of the things that I plan on growing and what I'm looking forward to in the upcoming season. Maybe we'll do a little bit of organization because, God forbid, I need to get organized because this is not it, friends. This is not it. This is not it. This is not it. This is not it. This is ridiculous. So maybe we'll do a little bit of organization and, you know, planning for future seasons. I'd love to hear what you guys have going on in your yards. If you have any great stories or assists that you can offer, any knowledge or information you can offer someone who is still new and trying all the crazy harebrained schemes and activities to try and get some things growing. I'd love to know what you all have planned for your yards. Are you going to do any type of pollinator friendly planting? Like I want to do a pollinator patch, which is on the back, the outside of my fence. We had to bring our fence line in like 8 feet from an eavesment. So I have space back there that I could actually plant along the entire fence, and I would just love to do a pollinator paradise there. But, you know, are you guys doing berries? Are you doing fruit trees? Do you have privacy trees? For those of you who are in subdivisions, who are in the city, please share your success tips. I need all the help that I can get. But anyway, thanks for hanging out with me, friends. More to come from the corner of Whymsy and Blyss.